part of that is research, so I'll have a survey for everybody to take here in the next couple of weeks.
I'm going to skew.
Anonymous.
I'm going to skew your survey.
That's fine. You can do all you want. It's pretty basic, because my understanding is pretty basic.
That's doubtful. Well, good morning, all. Thank you. Thank you. This weird little podium is freaking me out. Sounds good, though? Thank you, Lee. Pastor is the man. Did you get my picture up? All right. I'm ready, yeah. That's how I'm going to start the next few weeks. Ivy said that I was off base with this, so I'm going to take a poll. Oh, it's weird. Okay. So that's okay. So you're driving around the island or you're riding your bike, which I do that a lot, and I see the greatest mailboxes. And this one is not my favorite one, but it's flamboyant and fun. And so if you guys see something on the island, because we live in a cool place, and we're fortunate to live here, if you see something cool, snap a picture of it and send it to me or send it to Ivy or whatever. I'd love to post it up here and see who likes what the best. I have...
There's not a mailbox on the island you haven't seen.
Not many.
Ride your bikes.
Ivy, you need to hush. You need to hush.
25 miles.
Jerry, you need to hush too.
We need to send this to Jody Link, though. She loves flamingos.
Yeah? Yeah. There was a cool pelican one I saw yesterday when I was at an estate sale. That was cool.
You didn't buy it?
No, it was a mailbox.
I have a mailbox.
Yeah, can I buy your mailbox? Anyway, so if that's weird, you can tell me in private, showing pictures of mailboxes. You're going to like next week's, though. I believe it is the most unique mailbox on the island, the undisputed champion of weird mailboxes. That'll be next week. Show up to find out which one it is. All right, we're in John 9. This is weird. All right, John 9. Oh, we should open with prayer. God, thanks for today, for the brisk air, for your beautiful creation, and the creativity of people with their lawns or mailboxes or whatever's going on. Thanks for being able to live here next to your ocean. Undoubtedly one of the most powerful forces on earth. Thanks for looking down on us, despite all that power, for caring for us, for thinking of us and keeping us up in existence, and managing our journey into holiness. We love you. I pray John works in all of our lives and teaches us something. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, we'll start with John 9:1. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus said. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the tasks assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. Buenos dias. Good morning. Hadn't seen you two in a while. Welcome. Verse 6. Then, John 9, verse 6. Then he spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. Gross. That's not in the Bible. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. Siloam means sent. So the man went and washed and came back seeing. His neighbors and others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said he was, and others said, no, he just looks like him. The beggar kept saying, yes, I am the same one. They asked, who healed you? What happened? He told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went and washed, and now I can see. Where is he now, they asked. I don't know, he replied. What's with the spittle? I mean, that would be weird for me. Spit in the dirt, let me put it on your eyes.
I read that it was symbolic of the dirt from where we came. And then saliva, I can't remember, saliva is like life, and without saliva, I don't know. But it reminded me of kids that do that handshake.
Yeah, yeah.
that, you know, that's what it made me think of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like a promise, a contract, a deal.
Mm-hmm.
Kind
Yeah, reportedly, spittle or saliva had healing properties back in the day. That's what they thought about it. And so it really wasn't that weird. It was not weird at all, like it is to us.
Represents water of life.
Water of life. There you go. Jesus was the water of life, the light of life. Yep. Cool. Yeah. Grandmas, moms, yeah.
Raise your hand if your grandmother didn't do that.
Yeah, lick their thumb, and yeah, yeah, or if you got a hair sticking up, you know. Yeah, it's good for all sorts of things. So, can you imagine being blind your whole life? In the year zero, no social support networks, no braille, no little bumps on the sidewalk that tell you that there's a car coming, you know, the little yellow bumps on our sidewalks. No support. You just sat around and begged your whole life. You had no social status at all. That'd be a tough gig. That'd be a hard pill to swallow, you know?
Was it, in those days, was it considered like evil, like you were, if you were born blind, or were you, like your parents sinned? I don't know. Was
Verse 2, Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? So a great question. It's the first thing they came out of the gate with.
Right.
Why was he blind? Who sinned? He or his parents?
So was he treated like a leper, like
I guess that people saw that it was his or his parents' sins, something heinous, and he was punished for it, I guess. So that would double his difficulty, because he survived on handouts. So yeah, great point, Ivy.
Which Ivy, you had brought out how many rules the Jewish people had to follow, so it could have been be easier to sin in their eyes
Yeah,
because they,
yeah. They
they did something that was considered work on Sabbath, but, or, something that would be just like, okay, so some sin happened, and this is
Mhm.
punishment for disobeying God.
Yeah, and they were really not his disciples who were talking here, but the Pharisees who we're going to see here in a second. They were the sin police. You know, they were looking for it at every turn, and they had them memorized, and they felt like they were above board. But they were always looking to nail people and blame people for sinning. So, and I guess that was pervasive in the culture. Sure sounds like. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. Morning. Does anybody read that like God made him blind so he could be glorified? It's sort of There's a lot of different versions. I read a bunch of different ones. The Message was the most clear, believe it or not, a simple paraphrase. But, and I'm not a Greek scholar, but there's a little Greek there that, and in John, this word is 11 times, and 4 times the way it's written, it makes more sense. It's about we must get to the work. The night is coming and then no one can work. We got to get to work. I'm here, I'm going to work in this guy's life. Not that I did it, but that makes more sense. And that's, if you interpret Scripture through Scripture, Jesus doesn't inflict people with blindness to glorify himself. It just doesn't happen that way, so.
Right, because in the Message, when his disciples asked him, whose sin hit he or his parents, Jesus said, you're asking the wrong question. That's verse 3. You know, Jesus said, you're asking the wrong question. You're looking for someone to blame. There's no such cause-effect here. Look instead for what God can do.
Yeah, that makes it clear. While I'm here, we got to get to work. So.
That goes back to chapter 4, where he's talking about, he's there to do the work of the Father, right? I'm here to
Yep.
do the will and work of the Father, and that's what that's about.
About doing the will and the work of the Father. Yep, chapter 4. All right, verse 13. Then they took the man who had been blind to the Pharisees, because it was on the Sabbath that Jesus had made the mud and healed him. You see a pattern here? The Pharisees asked the man all about it. So he told them, he put the mud over my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man, Jesus, is not from God, for he is working on the Sabbath. Others said, but how can an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was a deep division of opinion among them. That's one thing Jesus does well. He'll polarize opinions. Then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, what's your opinion about this man who healed you? The man replied, I think he must be a prophet. Verse 18. The Jewish leaders still refused to believe the man had been blind and could now see. So they called in his parents. They asked them, is this your son? Was he born blind? If so, how can he see now? His parents replied, we know this is our son, and he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him. He is old enough to speak for himself. They threw him under the bus because they were scared. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why they said, he is old enough. Ask him. Verse 24. So for the second time they called in the man who had been blind and told him, for the second time, God should get the glory for this because we know this man, Jesus, is a sinner. The blind man speaks up. I don't know whether he is a sinner, the man replied, but I do know this. I was blind, and now I can see. But what did he do, they asked. How did he heal you? Look, the man exclaimed. I told you once, didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Which, he had a little bit of attitude with his newfound eyes, you know. Then, verse 28, then they cursed him and said, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from. Why, that's very strange, the man replied. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from? We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he's ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. 33. If this man were not from God, he couldn't have done it. You were born a total sinner, they answered. Are you trying to teach us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. What?
A lot of fingertip spitting going on, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting little passage. For sure. There was neighbors, there was Pharisees, there was parents, and there was the healed guy. And they all responded differently. The neighbors, they were surprised, there was skepticism, they interrogated in disbelief, and they took him to the religious leaders. The Pharisees, disbelief, prejudice, you violated the Sabbath, and they called him a sinner. And the parents, they delivered his son. I mean, they gave him up. I mean, you ask him. We don't want to be excommunicated from the church. And the healed man, he had consistent growing faith. And he boldly increased the tension in that room, which he pressed the Pharisees, which I love the fact that he pressed the Pharisees.
But it wasn't necessarily in Jesus' favor. Because he was just like, I don't know either.
I was blind.
I mean, I was blind. I don't know Moses. I don't know God. I just know this guy healed me.
He was learning.
This man were not from God, he could do nothing.
Right. Who in the world has ever been able to make a blind man see?
Yeah.
No one.
Is that a prophecy in Isaiah that would be a sign of the prophet that would come?
Hmm.
Be able to heal the blind.
Cool.
That would be, I think, Isaiah 1.
That's right.
Yeah.
And don't you love how Jesus causes that tension purposefully? Because he could have just spoke it, or he could have just stopped the healing. He didn't have to be-
But he did work. But it would have
He
been.
didn't have to be there, but he specifically chose that method to cause a problem with the Pharisees, to try to get them focused on the reality of who he was,
Mm-hmm.
and set
Mhm.
them hard in their hearts and stiff in their necks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's interesting what Gail said, because being blind, they say, your other senses are heightened. So he was a hearer.
Oh, yeah. He heard it. You know, he heard everything probably. Yeah. Good point.
So if he heard the Isaiahs, and the only way he could get healed is through this new Messiah. Because in the beginning of chapter 9, it doesn't say that he went after Jesus. He wasn't like the lady who pulled on his cloak. Jesus came to him. And so he could have known the only way I'm being healed in my life is if this Messiah comes. And so he's got to be him.
Because the next verse does say, this man, he was not from God, he would not be able to do it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, he has such huge spiritual book. He didn't care if he would get kicked out of synagogue.
He's like, I can see.
He's like, I haven't been there probably in a long time, But
Yeah, I can't imagine being blind from birth and having somebody heal you and then be attacked by the religious leaders calling him a sinner. I would hope that I would respond like that or a little more violently,
Well, we hope we would.
Well,
But
I
if
hope.
somebody walked in here and said, I was blind my whole life, and this morning,
Pastor Jim healed me.
somebody out there
Yeah, somebody just walking down the street healed me.
healed me, we'd be going, mm-hmm,
Yeah, right.
mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so Gail's reference was out of Isaiah 35:5, which is, then the eyes of the blind shall be opened and the ears of the deaf stop. Then the lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute will sing for joy.
Good memory, Gil.
35:5. I can remember because it was easy.
35:5.
35:5.
Yeah, part of the theme running through these last few chapters, Pastor Jim said this morning, he did a study on it. The Pharisee in me. And that I like the little rhyme, the Pharisee in me. I think that's one of the main driving points because he's writing to us. I mean, there's no question. I mean, he's writing to the people of the time, but he's also writing to the future Christian church. And this is for us. So how do we find the Pharisee in me? Not the Pharisee in everybody else. That's a little easier to spot, though, other people's sins.
I think like Ivy said, you know, we are very, we'll hear somebody say, oh, I was healed from that. And you're like, oh, good for you, or oh, this happened great in my life, God did this. Oh, good for you. But
Oh, so sweet.
do we really rejoice with the people? Do we really believe them?
Yeah,
Do we give God the glory like this woman was saying?
you got a good point. Miracles. Do they occur? In what form? I mean, how drastic, you know? Benny Hinn makes intellectuals say that miracles are a farce. You know, that guy with the big hair that smacked people on the forehead, knocked them down.
There's evidence, there was evidence that he was born blind. I mean, sometimes you see miracles, but there's, you know, there's really no evidence of that previous condition. There's no outward sign. But this was obvious. They brought his parents and knew he could come. So this was truly, a miracle.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. So, yeah, I mean, back then, this is recorded history, right? But today is more what I was thinking.
I heard a doctor's take on during his blindness. It's just not eyeballs that didn't work, the whole nervous system and how pathways and everything to the brain to make somebody able to see is a lot more than just fixing eyeballs.
Right. Fixing eyeballs is totally neurological and wrapped through the whole body and the brain, not just eyeballs.
And I think we didn't recognize them either, because some people have that like white thing, or their eyes are going in opposite directions, or, you know, they.
Yeah, he probably looked physically quite different.
Yeah, they wrap their heads so that it's not awkward to look at the person,
Mm-hmm.
you know, type of a thing, and so it's probably really natural for that.
And in our everyday life, like that new technology that Elon Musk company came out with, where people, paraplegics can have a neuro thing put in their brain, and they can think to their computer, and their computer will do what they're thinking. And we're like, oh my gosh, Elon Musk, but it's not.
Jesus did it 2,000 something years ago.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's
The neural
not.
link was there.
I mean, you say, thank you, God, for this technology, but oftentimes we forget that.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Great point.
Neuralink, it's called.
Yep. The Pharisees in verse 3, is it because of his sins or his parents' sins? And then the Pharisees again in verse 34, you were born a total sinner. They answered, are you trying to teach us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. At both points, they were spiritually blind. They were just off. And the man was physically blind in the beginning, and then he gained his physical sight, and he also gained spiritual sight. So he had physical sight and spiritual sight, and the Pharisees never had the spiritual sight, which is drawn out by John. Yeah, they wielded their power pretty ruthlessly. I mean, the guy was just, I can't help it. He was just healed. I mean, that was the guy that hung around and begged every day, and everybody had to know him. He was in this town center. That's where you get the most handouts, you know? Everybody saw him every day. And they threw him out of the church. They must have really hated Jesus. Jesus was up in their face about everything.
He looked different. If he was standing upright, he probably never was.
Just, it's interesting.
Did they put Jesus out of the synagogue or the?
No, the blind man, the blind guy, yeah.
And that's why it's so essential that we always keep in the forefront the purpose of miracles, right? The purpose of miracles in the New Testament was always to authenticate either like we're seeing here, because he's trying to prove who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes with these, with miracles and things, when people are talking about that, they lose sight of, well, the purpose of a miracle is not necessarily, yes, the byproduct is healing over your soul, over your body, whatever that would be. But that's all to authenticate who Jesus is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great point. And I had a note here to say, if in modern day, if there were someone who were performing miracles, how would you authenticate it? Who gets the glory? Right? Where's the focus? Is it to show the reality and glorify Jesus Christ? Is that center stage? Benny Hinn is not. That's the furthest thing from that moron's point of view, you know? So, yeah.
And the thing is
It
that-
was about glorifying God and showing who God was, right?
And this guy was probably one of multiple people with that, multiple people who were begging there with an ailment or
Sure.
lameness or whatever it was.
Everybody had to know him all, right? Yeah.
Right. So it's not like he did this mass healing.
He picked one, the guy who would,
The guy who had no fear at the end.
chutzpah. He had chutzpah,
Chutzpah,
that's
there
for
you
sure.
Jesus' miracles, he would send them, and we would never hear from him. We
Okay,
didn't hear his
fantastic point.
Where-
What about the lame guy?
where, yeah, where
Jesus
he
said,
said-
go and tell nobody.
Yeah. So this may actually.
And he went and ran his mouth.
Hard.
Yeah. Yep, he was very... I can only imagine seeing that, and I can't imagine... Yeah, the corruptness deserved to be challenged the way Jesus challenged it, obviously, because... And Jesus' point is, like, you're a sinner because you're healing on the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man, not man, or is that did I get that right? Sabbath made for the man, not man for the Sabbath. And so, your compassion for human beings, your friend's cow gets stuck in a ravine, you go help him get it out so it doesn't die, because that's what you do. If your kid, one of the kids, you go to work and you fix the kid if he gets injured. That's, and they took it to an extreme where they just didn't allow that. And so the Pharisee in me, I'm thinking about how do I let my rules get in or my behaviors or my whatever it is, get in the way of compassion for human people? How do I dig into my little area and say, no, this is just the way I do it? And I maybe don't offer that compassionate hand or word or whatever it may be.
They've lost sight of, I think, pharisaical way, they've lost sight of God and lived in a way where power was finite, where God's power is infinite, and they wanted to control.
They definitely wanted control. Yep. Infinite power is definitely, God's power is infinite. The more you give, the more you have to give, which is a beautiful thing.
Kind of like, I look at sometimes and I convict myself, and it's almost like the Pharisees say, okay, God, this is your plan, we'll take it from here, you don't worry about it, we'll run everything here. And we do that too. We're like, okay, God, this is your
Okay,
plan,
God, I got
plan,
this. I got this.
right, go help somebody else, I can run with this, and we tend to think we know what God's plans are, and, because I think they thought they were doing what was right, and they were protecting that, and they were like,
100%.
Yeah, they got lost in it, for sure.
and egos and all that, get
Mm-hmm.
added to that.
And to me, this passage, and I love the Pharisee in me quote, he's talking to us. I mean, there's nobody else. And so how do we find the Pharisee in me? So,
If we think of the word prejudice, because that's what we're talking about, it means to prejudge. And the Pharisee in me prejudges. They had already set up a set of circumstances
Yeah.
we envision something, and here's how it is, and maybe in this case, that's not how it is.
Mm-hmm.
So if we could handle that word prejudice as prejudging and stop prejudging and hear the case, it would radically change our outcomes.
Okay, so boots on the ground, that would be someone who has a different idea than you, or looks different, or is different socioeconomic, or different race, or different whatever, and instead of you judging them based on your fenced area that you're comfortable with, that you're educated on, you listen and you hear what they have to say, and you get to know the human inside the thing that you're prejudiced against. And what's that?
You go for the heart.
Go for the heart.
That's what, yeah.
Listen to their heart. Listen to their story. The issue there is that takes a lot of time and effort, and it takes prayer, and it takes a lot of energy.
Well, it's easier to codify and to categorize.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, then we just, with the one.
You sweep out everything else that doesn't fit in your schema. Yeah.
Here's a situation that was divine intervention. Well, they'd already prejudged that's not gonna happen because we know he's the sinner, so.
Oh, they knew it. They swept anything else out.
Yeah, this is something else.
And you think about the last chapter, they set that woman up with two witnesses that were told what was going to happen. And, I mean, they set her up to make their point with him. So not only did they codify or have their structure of their belief system and sweep everything else out like they did here, they set up a scenario to get to him. Yeah, just not good.
Well, right when you prejudge, and we all do that, you're not hearing the other person. We see that with the Pharisee and me. When I have those parameters in place and I don't hear the person's heart like I be saying, even when they're saying something that makes sense, I'm not going to hear it because I've already conceived in my mind my response and my answer.
Right.
I've seen that the last couple of weeks recently where I've talked with people and they're like, well, da-da-da-da. It's like, that's not it at all. You're not hearing this other person. You already predetermined in your mind what it is when the facts are A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like A, B, and C.
Right.
But what is,
Right. But you can't even understand facts necessarily when you're so set on your judgment.
right.
And like we're seeing with the Pharisees, right? They're
Yep.
so set on their false facts. They should have seen it from the Old Testament that Jesus was who he said he was from Isaiah and everything else. But they're so predetermined in their heart and in their minds and in their souls and in their teaching, like Pastor John was saying, this is what's happened. This can happen, you know. And so even when it makes sense of what Jesus and the man are saying, they're so set on their way that even when true facts are presented, they can't break through.
Yeah, they can't get to the heart because of the facts that they think they see.
And boy, that hits me hard because I can be, I know it's hard to believe, but in my profession, it's easy to get a little cynical sometimes because you deal with people. So, and you got to put that aside.
Yeah.
But I think even as you get older, you have more experiences. When you were in your 20s, you were less judgy with people than you were, in your 50s and 60s. Because you're,
No.
Because you have a lot of experience, so maybe you're a little more judgy.
because you've seen this before, or
Mhm.
heard this before,
Mhm.
and you're like, oh, I know what it is. You know,
Mhm.
diagnose.
Right. Some of that is,
They have issues.
yeah.
That issue, and you're like, yeah, they're just hearing them out.
And so all of this that we're talking about, prejudgment, being prejudiced and all that, that's the way we were created, because it helps us survive too. If we didn't prejudge scenarios, we would all be in difficulty. And so you have to understand that that's who you are and that's the way you're going to think about things, but you also have to manage it and not let it get to you. And when you're in a scenario, you want to see the heart. And if your facts keep blowing up in your face, this person's just a drug addict, they're just an idiot, or whatever it is, my neighbor is such a jerk, my boss, my client, go figure. If you can get to the heart, you can see what Jesus is after, I think.
This whole, the blind thing, we prejudge so much with our eyes.
Oh, yeah. We prejudge with our eyes.
And
Yeah.
while you guys were all just talking, I closed my eyes, and I had to use my ears a lot more. Like, I really had to focus on like, really listening, because we take in so much of what we hear by body language, and we prejudge that, but when you close your eyes and you hear, all you get to do is hear the words, it's just such a, I don't know, I was like, man, being blind might, like, in that way, would be really cool.
It would add something.
With, if
Not that I want to
could
be
not
blind, but
pick up on the nuance of a body language,
Mhm.
and it would change the whole, I mean, how many times do we say, you know, don't create narratives that aren't true?
mhm.
We prejudge people by their body, I mean, there's so much that so being blind.
Yep, and that's good and bad. It can be bad in that it can cause us to sin and box somebody into our box, or it can be good and in a situation where you need to, you know. Lee, did you want to say something?
We came up before church started, we talked about, we can see in individuals, but all groups, we were talking about, like, Democrats and Republicans, when we talk about January 6th. Republicans, that was just a bunch of people out of line. Democrats, that is an insurrection and impeach the president. I mean, it's right down the line, and it's because of their group more than logical thinking. It's a Republican, that's one of the people out of line,
Mhm.
Democrat, that's an insurrection, trying to overthrow the government. It's, you know, it's very easy to do mass like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Sadducees, and, you know, Pharisees, you know, it's gotta be this way.
Yep,
But
Yep.
that's the way we all, you know,
right.
mind think.
Yep. Yeah, Democrats and Republicans are quite different, have different views on things. But it's easy to, Robert.
Just maybe not quick point, but 2 points. What you were saying about, you know, your eyesight, your eyes not always telling you the truth, what's going on. I'll look in corrections, and the biggest, most accurate, the most inaccurate evidence you can have at a court hearing is going to be an eyewitness testimony.
Yeah,
Because people see what they want to see, and people don't see what they don't want to see.
yeah,
And it's just, there's been so many people that have been exonerated due to DNA evidence, and they were convicted because of eyewitness testimony.
eyewitness testimony is not always accurate.
And the second point I want to say is like a modern analogy, without preconceptions and things like that, could be the insurance companies that don't see their customers as human. They just see a number, an algorithm. and
That's where we are today.
They deny them coverage. They never hear the person's story. They
Mhm.
never get to know the customer. And it's something like you were saying about our past. Our past puts in our minds algorithms on how to judge other people, how to look at the world.
Mhm.
And we have to let the Holy Spirit overcome that in our lives so we can see people as people and not just what our algorithms telling us to look at them as.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's exempt, you know, it's not like the crowd was perfect here, because 2 chapters later, when Lazarus passes away, they're gonna fall into this too. They're gonna say something like, hey, if Jesus was here, this man wouldn't have died, you know, so it's like, no one is exempt from this, algorithm, I like that.
Right.
Of thinking.
Yeah, and he's pointing at the Pharisees, and he, you know, Jesus has his disciples, but his disciples are not immune from it either. They have it in them. It's the Pharisee in all of us, you know. And so, to get the point of this chapter and this book, he's talking to us. We're the ones that need to find this stuff in ourselves, and it takes a lot of work. Anybody have like an example, or do you have an idea how you do that?
The real inspiration is the blind guy himself. I mean, he came face to face with Jesus. We don't know how judgmental he was before that, but his faith became practical
Mm-hmm.
and bold.
Mm-hmm. It did, because God, not only did he take care of his physical needs, but he took, most importantly, he took care of his spiritual needs. because that's always the priority, right? You deal with the physical, but the spiritual is the ultimate goal. And so one of the points the author of the commentary made is he's like, you don't have to be Christian educated, Christian for 30 years, and have read the Bible 100 times to tell about your faith in Jesus. Just like this guy did, tell them what you know. Tell them what happened to you. Tell them how it changed your life. Just open your mouth and tell them that. And I was like, oh, that's super cool, you know. Yeah, he didn't care because yeah, exactly. Yeah. John.
His belief didn't come when he was talking to the Pharisees. It came afterward. All he knew is that he'd experienced a miracle, and he was reporting accurately.
I don't know.
He wasn't a believer yet.
No.
The text tells us that.
Mm-hmm.
That afterwards Jesus sought him out. He said, well, tell me who he is.
Yeah, Jesus went and found him.
He wasn't a believer when he gave testimony. He just believed in the possibility and the reality of the miracle, and then he focused it, as has been said,
Mm-hmm.
on Jesus, which is what the purpose was.
Mm-hmm.
But he was willing to be bold where his parents weren't.
No, they were weenies.
I mean, but, you know, they probably were persecuted all his life. You have a blind child, what did you do?
Yeah, yeah.
And rumors flew, you know, or whatever happened, and so they were like, no, I'm not walking into this trap again. We're gonna let him speak for himself. I mean, having adult children, they like to speak, to speak for themselves, and you should let them, so I kinda get that too, but they totally let their previous experience
Shape their behavior.
the Pharisees.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Our previous experience shapes our behavior too. To your point just a minute ago, you said, you know, we create algorithms with which to be efficient and live our life.
But man, they're, verse 28 there, I mean, rather than being happy that this guy has received his sight, they're so angered by what he has said. And you know, the miracle's taken place, but literally says they reviled him. I mean, think of that. It's not just a judgment, it was just, they were angry and bitter and all that other stuff that goes with reviling of what took place, and saying, well, you're one of his disciples.
Mm-hmm.
We're of Moses.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great, thank you for reading that, because I was getting ready to go right there. We're disciples. No, it's a perfect lead in. I love it when that happens. We're disciples of Moses. We don't even know who this guy is. Well, they're putting a division right between disciples of Moses and disciples of Jesus. They're driving a wedge, right? And so in the chapter or a few before, Abraham saw Jesus' position and celebrated. So Abraham, I assume Moses is there with him in heaven, right? So they're celebrating together. So just because you're a disciple of Moses and you become a disciple of Jesus, it doesn't nullify you being a disciple of Moses, because Moses is a Jesus fan. And so what they're doing it doesn't make any sense. It's a great question. The end of this chapter deals with a little bit of that, and it throws a wrench into things again, you know.
Some of the reasons in verse 16, it says, some of the Pharisees were saying, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. There again, that's Moses, right?
And he does not keep the Sabbath according to the way we interpret the Sabbath rules.
Right, because
They're self-inflicted, yeah. Yeah.
rules protect the rules.
Yes, rules and rules and rules. And Jesus is like, compassion for man is what this is about, more than the Sabbath. Which is why I think he keeps breaking it, because it ticks him off.
It's a really good discipleship tool, what Jim was just talking about, when you're talking to someone about God, there's people that are just ambivalent, and there are people that are spiritually defensive. And that's when you know there's fruit,
Yeah,
because we only get defensive over things
that means something.
that mean something,
Yeah,
and they were defensive.
your cousin Kevin the other night, when he was so defensive about religion, I'm like, oh, I need to pray for you more, because there's a soft spot there. And we're going to figure out how long it's going to take to get that soft spot worked out, you know. Yeah, it's fun.
Knowledge without relationship,
Right. Yes. And so let's lead right into verse 35. Once again, perfect lead in. Thank you, Gail. When Jesus heard what had happened, he found the man and asked, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man answered, "Who is he, sir? I want to believe in him." Which shows that he had hope, which we've talked about. "You have seen him," Jesus said, "and he is speaking to you." "Yes, Lord, I believe," the man said, and he worshiped Jesus. Then Jesus told him, "I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and show those who think they see that they are blind." I'm going to read 39 again. Then Jesus told him, "I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and show those who think they see that they are blind." Some Pharisees who were standing nearby heard him. I imagine quite intentionally. He said it just, maybe he was leaned over. "Hey, I came to the world." He's like, "I'm going to get you." So some Pharisees who were standing nearby heard him and asked, "Are you saying we're blind? If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty." Jesus replied, "But you remain guilty because you claim you can see." Ivy, you were going to say something.
Well, in the message, what John was saying, 39 says, Jesus then said, "I came into the world to bring everything into the clear light of day, making all the distinctions clear, so that those who have never seen will see, and those who have made a great pretense of seeing will be exposed as blind."
It makes me rethink saying that I see about spiritual stuff. It's like,
And this goes back to Nicodemus, chapter 3, when Jesus says, "For judgment I did not come into the world to judge the world, because the world is condemned already." Exactly. That's what that's referring to, I think. It's going all the way back to there.
the world's condemned already.
Condemned already. Judgment is already there. It's not like nobody's judged. Everybody's judged evenly
Right.
because of our sin.
Yeah.
And so we're condemned sinners, and Jesus came because God so loved the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great point to sort of spiritually interpret verse 41. Because there's some folks that get lost on 41. If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty. Well, no, you're guilty because of the sin, your sin. There's no way around that. The Bible clearly says it in 100 different places. Not that many, but you remain guilty because you claim you can see.
And Chris is bringing us back to the, sorry, if we just chuckling over here, what is it, 20?
I'm glad it's fun.
It is fun. You know, where he says, "Why do you want to hear it a second time? Do you want to be his disciples too?"
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a smart mouth. Yeah.
We love
Uh-huh.
it,
Yeah, no, that made me laugh too.
I don't think the Pharisees ever got it not properly.
Yeah, you know how badly it got under their skin?
Oh, yeah.
From this guy who is clearly a sinner from birth, and his family's a sinner, and he was, he was punished for that. That's their perspective, right? And it got under their skin as bad as saying, "I entered the world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and show those who think they see that they are blind."
Well, but my commentary said, by the end of this story, we see that the formerly blind man is the only one who is truly seeing. As Christians, God has opened our eyes to many truths about him, that he is the healer and that Jesus is the Son of Man, but we must not be so bold as to assume that we see all things clearly.
That's great. We must not be so bold to assume that we see all things clearly. You guys are like playing right into these notes. So one of the things is what one claims about spiritual insight maybe shouldn't always be trusted, or can't be trusted, or maybe should be given give some thought about it. And it goes, read what you said again. Sorry.
Just that last part, but we must not be so bold as to assume that we see all things clearly.
We must not be so bold to assume we see all things clearly.
And
That's
that's
like
my need for
a
God.
rule of thumb. That's one that we should carry around with us, and it should be, so I have red flags that come up, and I quote certain things when I get into a situation, and that's one of those. If I get into a scenario where I think I'm like, I need to quote that to myself if I'm feeling smart or if I'm feeling spiritual or whatever. I need to quote that and be like, nah.
I go back to what Chris said, in that I can't tell you how many times I've had to ask God forgiveness because I've taken the pen away from him in regard to my children. And I'm like, I've got this. I know you, so I've got my kids. And instead of the opposite.
Taking the pen away from God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To write their story.
To write their story. Yeah. We need not be so bold to assume that we have the right
To
interpret
assume that we see all things clearly.
that we see all things clearly.
Did Paul say something about seeing through a glass darkly?
Mm-hmm. Nice point. Yep. Yep. And once again, putting that boots on the ground to people, your neighbors, the people at the store, whoever, a beggar, because we have a beggar here, a blind person. It takes time and effort and energy to do that, to get outside of the structure that you've created for you, and structure is incredibly important to me. My wife teases me about it all the time. She's like, you're going to get up and do this and this and that and this and that. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do, honey. And it's good. And it keeps us moving in a lot of different ways. But in reference to spiritual matters, we need to be flexible, and we need to check ourselves. We need to check the pen that we find ourselves in, our structure, and we need to make the effort and will ourselves, because it's not always easy. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Some people make it really difficult. But we need to will ourselves to hear the heart, like Jim was saying. You were going to say something, John.
I had a professor in college, philosophy guy, and he said, beware of developing the attitude that what my net doesn't catch isn't fish. It took me a while to understand that, but he said, when you have a little knowledge, you think, okay, I've got it all.
Mm-hmm.
So if my net doesn't catch it,
Mm-hmm.
it isn't fish.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact is, there are fish out there we don't know.
Right. No question. That's a great point. There's a lot that we don't know about, given the fish analogy, but
As you said, it's part of human nature. We do need to systematize things.
we need structure. We need all the things we're talking about.
We need an asterisk, that's all. We need an asterisk that says, okay, this is how I deem this situation, but there could be something I'm missing.
Right.
So I'll listen.
But I'm open to hear.
What's that Greek term that mentioned 4 times in that? But then.
I don't remember Greek terms,
Just said.
but so that. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but we do need an asterisk. And for me, my way of remembering it is a red flag. You might not have a handle on this like you think. You need to hear them out, and you need to not put your assumptions on all of it and hear what we've called it for a lot of years in the therapeutic world is the meta message. They could be presenting all this other stuff, but you got to get to what the heart of the message is to see what's going on with that human. Because most people don't want to just dive into the thing that's hurting them in therapy. So, and that's true with people too. If your neighbor's a jerk and he acts like a jerk and he's, lets his dog poop on your yard, or well, I don't know, smells like a jerk, talks like a jerk, thinks like a jerk, acts like a jerk, there's a reason why. Because he's a human and he's got feelings and emotions and hurts just like us. And if you were to hear what his hurt was, which he may never tell you, but if you were to hear what his hurt was, you'd say, oh man, no wonder he's a jerk. He's got a thorn in his paw,
I wish 30 and 38, out of his belief, it says he believed in worship, and we see that constantly happening in John and other places where people believe and their response is worship. I wish it had a asterisk or a concluding statement there, this is what he did.
Mhm.
We don't know if that was verbal in his heart or, you know, what that.
Yeah, and this is how he did it. Hillsong blew up in the background, and he was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
ah! Yeah. But he worshiped. And okay, I'm going to pull that because what did he do? He went about his life. Because us living our lives, we talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, us going to work, us doing yard work, us going shopping, us doing things, crafters, taking people places. That's worship. That's how we worship God. We do it with an attitude of gratitude, and we convey the love of Christ everywhere we go. That's your functional worship. This is corporate, formal worship, but the worship that you do, and you can worship all day, every day, by living your life and trying to be holy. Not that you get everything right, but you're headed on the right path. That's how you do it. That's my humble paraphrase of a bunch of scriptures. But okay, so this guy, this blind guy, had such an influence on Christianity, it's unreal. In the 11th century in Milan, the third Sunday of Lent was the Sunday of the blind man. I didn't know that. That's just cool, man, because he had such an impact. Because he got his eyes opened by Jesus, he had spiritual enlightenment. He was bold. He was questioned. He was persecuted after his salvation, and he still worshipped. So he's like the model, right? In the 3rd century, this is just a quote, examinations were given to baptismal candidates during Lent. 3 tests were given, and then John 9 was read aloud. The one final test. They thought it a fitting model of what it means to be a Christian who was ready to answer for their faith. If they passed the test, the passage about cleansing water were read before baptism. Then the confession of the blind man was read, I do believe, Lord. Verse 38. Well, that's cool, man. That's part of Christian history because Christ opened this guy's eyes and he enlightened him spiritually as well. And his art is found in early catacombs, and it appears as an example of conversion or baptism. So it's like cave art. He was all over the place. Yeah, somebody say something over here? No? Okay. Any final thoughts? Yeah, Melinda.
Scripture that instead of worrying about a speck in somebody else's eye, think about a log in your eye.
It's a great point. And that goes a long way. And there's a lot of scriptures that speak to it. That's a really great one. It goes a long way to seeing the heart. Because if you're not looking to nail somebody and be spiritual police, sin police, whatever, if you have, it helps you ready your heart to hear the other human. Yeah, it does. It really does. And that's a great way to close, because that's what we need to be about. Everybody is a little different than you. And everybody who's different than you will both be fun and exciting and rub you the wrong way. And so, where they rub you the wrong way, don't look for the speck. Good stuff. John is a blessing for all of us. No question. Not John the pastor. Thanks, guys.